Good morning. Hello, friends and family, and welcome to another Saturday morning coffee and conversation with the If You Could See Me project. I am your host and ever anxious leader. I hate to say fearless leader because that would be a lie. Erin Mahone. It is amazing this morning to be joined here by my friend, fellow storyteller, amazing human all around, Mr. Nick Baskerville. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting. I get to talk to you. I mean, that was good enough. And
Oh,
not only that, I have coffee. Let the good times roll.
coffee. I mean, if you get to have some coffee and a good conversation to kick off the weekend, that to me seems like a fantastic opportunity. So I'm always honored and thrilled to be in your presence, however I get to. Nick, you are an amazing storyteller. You do things that many people can't do. Uh, and I really enjoy your work. I also love sort of the intersection uh, of your your work as a storyteller and your work, as an Air Force member and a firefighter and a leader in that world, and the way in which you are able to build humor into that and to talk about, sort of things that we don't, average people, we don't know about, right? And and how can we learn how to better talk about the things that you sort of have seen every day in your professional life that, that the average person just sort of doesn't look at. So, you know what? But before, and I just realized this. I want to share this, and I didn't. So I'm going to give you that giant lead up, and then give you about 15 seconds to think about it while I while I do the job. I told Nick before we started that one day I'll have a producer on here with me in the mornings when I'm doing this, so that I'm not pulling double duty. But I somehow, the theater kid in me likes the adrenaline of bouncing around in this weird space of trying to do everything all at once. So, um, oh, look at this copy. And I know so many things. Thank you so much.
Th- I'm glad that you're able to do this because I am a single track person. I will do something really good, but it will only be one thing really good at a time. That's it.
Well, me too, which is obviously I'm only I'm only doing one thing well right now. Um, Okay, done. It's shared into the larger Facebook realm. Thank you so much. Yeah, I used to be, when I was younger, much better at multitasking, and now it's like it's a joke. So anyway, hi Nick, how are you? Thank you for your patience.
I'm fine.
We are nothing if not authentically flawed in the If You Could See Me space. So
Oh, that is the beauty of it, right?
it is. It absolutely is. So Air Force, firefighter, storyteller, comedian, humorist, person, dad, all these things. Why, how? Tell me your whole life story, please. Because I'm also an adept interviewer.
uh, so, like most things in life, I fell into all that stuff by accident. I just kind of slipped, tripped, and then I was like, "Oh, I guess I'll do this for a little while." The military thing was a bit more focused. Like I knew I wanted to leave home. I wasn't ready for college. And my mom, I came from a time and a mom who said, like, look, here's three things that you're going to do when you graduate. You're going to go to college. You're going to leave home and get a job, or you're going to get a job and stay home. Like those are the options. However, I figured that out was it. And so I opted for the military. And then I did that for 14 years, well, 10 years active duty. And then I was like, hey, I don't like this so much. And so as I was trying to figure out what to do when to get out, a friend of mine's, he knew that I taught CPR and first aid. He's like, hey, you should become an EMT. But whatever you do, don't be an EMT in New York. And I was like, well, why not New York? And he's like, well, they get shot at in New York. I was like, oh, come to find out, everybody gets shot at New York. Like, that's not just to EMT people. That's like anybody who lives there.
Right.
But I wound up getting to Washington D.C. and I started volunteering as a firefighter, and because I wanted to kind of see if I liked it or not. My theory being, if I did it for free and I liked it, then doing it for a paycheck would be phenomenal. And that's exactly what happened. I was hooked the first day, just at the ride along. I was like, this is great. So I volunteered for a while and applied to, like, I think, I can't remember if it's 23 or 53, a whole bunch of places. I had applied to fire departments all around in the area, wound up in Northern Virginia. So I've been in the fire service now in 21 years. A few years ago, probably around 2009, I just got turned over to teach in the fire department. So we teach the, pulling the fire hose and the hazmat stuff and the EMT stuff. And so I was doing some of the hazmat stuff, and I just did like 8 hours of lecture teaching people awesome things like Ludwig Benner's a behavioral model of hazardous material things. It's phenomenal. It's great. And at the end of that time, a student comes to me and says, "Sir, I don't get it." I'm like, "Well, what don't you get, sir?" "All of it. I don't get anything that you talked about." And I wanted to choke him, but I need this job and the benefits to go along with it. So I'm like,
Right.
I don't think that's the answer. But then I asked myself, what if it's not him? Right? So what could I do to improve what I was doing and everything else? One of the things I think about the fire service when we teach instructors, it's very much into the skills part. Here's how you do this skill. Here's how you tie this rope. Here's how you throw this ladder. Here's how. Now you're a great instructor. No, now you're a person who know a lot of things. It doesn't mean that you know how to deliver what it is that you know. So with that in mind, I joined Toastmasters. They had a local Toastmasters group there for county government. It was free. And I did that. I was like, this is great. And Toastmasters is great because it helps you to kind of structure thinking. It gives you regular practice. All these things are built into there. And I got better. The thing I was wondering, though, is you learn these skills in Toastmasters and they work well in Toastmasters, but would they work outside of Toastmasters? Now, Toastmasters fits phenomenally in public speaking in general. So the way they have you find a point, hammer in the point, worked great for when I was teaching. But what if I wanted to, and it's not what if, I wanted to do public speaking as a whole, go to conferences and conventions and talk to people and say things. All right, well, this worked there. Around then, one of my mentors said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the moth?" And I was like, "Yes, that's called a bug. What does that happen?" She's like, "No, silly. It's a storytelling show." And around that time in DC, they had just started like a live offering there. So I went there and I tried it, and I was like, this is cool, and some of the things for Toastmasters worked really well. Some of them not as much.
Yeah.
And then this thing started happening. People was like, hey, you did pretty good. You should go check out this show. I'm like, oh, okay. So I go check out, and then that would happen again and again. And I was like, hey, is there one place where I could find all of these shows? And they're like, no, you just kind of wing it. And I was like, I don't like that idea.
Right.
So I started Storytelling on Purpose, the blog, so I could track all that stuff. So I could have a reason to go all these shows and explain to my wife that, look, I'm doing research. I'm not just goofing off, going to the club all the time, doing that sort of thing. One of the things that I picked up on, I can't tell you exactly when it hit me, but it did, is a well-told story is a way for anybody to get their point of view out into the world. And now it can, sometimes it's the person with the most money and they're deranged in how they're thinking, and that's true. But then for the person who doesn't have all that, you can still do that, right? And so I started using storytelling in all kinds of ways that I thought, well, I need to use it. For me, storytelling, it's based in doing something practical. Right. So it didn't come from arts and being creative. It's I need to do something. I need to convey this thought. And I have 10 minutes. I have 3 minutes. I need to make it this kind of rich. I need to explain to these sort of groups of people, this audience. And so that's what I did. And so I started using different skills. So going to the different places, learning that first, I just got used to the fact that there's different themes, right? So there's the moth, And there's the Story Collider, which is awesome because they're taking real science, but they're making it, entertaining. Which science was already entertaining to me, but that they do it in that great way. There's a show called The Perfect Liars Club,
Mhm.
where like four people tell a story, one person's lying, you got to figure it out. People are bad at catching people lying. I don't know
Yes.
if the last few years has taught anybody that already, but I already had a hunch before all this happened. I was like, they're not going to get this right.
Yep.
Right. And so there's all those sort of things. And so that was great. And then I started using stories. I started doing stories at the Moth and all these places, and then using those same stories at work when I was teaching.
Mhm.
Because my thinking was, if I could tell this story to people who were half inebriated and they understood what I was saying, then
Right.
people who are fully caffeinated in the morning will understand it and get a point or a concept. So uh, did all that, and it's working pretty well. I help to advocate for things in the fire service. So there's a day in Capitol Hill where people are kind of lobbying, so the fire service people kind of get together and we lobby for things that we need that year. Just all those sort of things where I'm just using story in different iterations and styles and things like that. And I'm taking storytelling and reading books every chance I get. Like every storytelling book I can find, I'm reading and I'm getting down. For me, I'm getting to the structure. Like, oh, these are different elements. What happens when you move them around? How do you make it? Oh, there's a whole different style of storytelling. And so this is where I started to stumble in, and then particularly from the pandemic, I became a part of a Facebook group, which is now an actual group called Artists Standing Strong Together.
Mhm.
And in there, I learned, oh, there's like things like folk tales and fairy tales and liar's tales, and there's spiritual storytelling, right? And then there's an Iranian one where like you have to get it's like being made into the mafia. Like you can't just decide you want to do it. Like someone has to vouch for you. You have to be an understudy. They have to see what you. But it's a phenomenal type of storytelling, right? So now, over the pandemic, I'm like, well, what else can you? What types of storytelling are there? What does the structure look like? How can I change it, rearrange it, and everything else? And so for me, some of the things I cover in my blog, it's just kind of my journey to kind of like, how am I figuring all that sort of stuff out?
Right.
Which then leads me to taking a class with ASAP, the Armed Services Art Partnership. And they're there for the military community. So whether you're in the military, retired, separated, military spouse, working with the military, whatever, and they teach you performing art stuff. So I signed up for the storytelling class because why not?
Right.
But it's like you should have a backup class. So I said, fine, I'll do the comedy thing. Not really looking to be like doing stand-up comedy, but I did notice that people would laugh at my stories, even though I was never really trying to get them to laugh. I just kind of accepted that's what they were going to do.
So I have a question. I'm sorry, I have to
Yes.
interrupt you. In your, I believe it was your first moth story,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's a point at which you're talking about fighting a fire and the audience starts laughing and you say, "Why are you laughing at me?" Was that was that a moment where you were surprised that they were laughing at something that you were saying, or had that been practiced? Like, was that a off the cuff moment?
That was an off the cuff moment. So that wasn't my first one. That's the one that I won that month with.
Okay.
So yeah, it was like I did about 10 or so before I got to that point.
Okay.
But yeah, that was very much a no, for real. This is what that's what happened. And then kind of going along with it. And comedy has helped me with that as well. That I need to kind of flex and move the story. And I think in my progression of getting better, that's the one thing I got better with, right? So in the very beginning, it's like, this is my story. Here's the exact words and the exact beats, and this is exactly how. And now it's more like, here's the outline.
Right.
I have a good picture of how it is. I'm going to draw you into this picture. We're going to do this movie together, but I'm doing better in the delivery of it, I
Right.
feel like.
Yeah.
So,
So,
so go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead. No,
But yeah,
please.
so then, or how people are treated, not fitting in. They're all things that either they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that because it's scary, or oh, here we go, another bleeding heart, or whatever it happens to be. And so what I find is if I do a pretty good job, if I pick that, if whatever that subject is, and I get people laughing,
Mhm.
right, it helps break down a wall, and then I
Yeah.
can start kind of talking about other subjects. And because a good story and good humor will also it does the whole thing with the chemicals in your mind where it opens up the learning center. I think it's dopamine is what I want to think to say it is, but that also helps with learning. So if I want to give people a message, to give people an idea, something they never heard, doing it with humor kind of helps prime the pump for that. So
Yeah. It's really fascinating that you say that, because it was, when I first started doing this, I was really doing it from a perspective of like humorous storytelling, like taking some of the most ridiculous things that had happened in my life growing up in a family where there was very serious mental illness, and sort of like not making fun of it, but finding humor in it.
hmm
And being able to do that was this sort of, it was like a magical gateway of sitting in a room with, a couple hundred people and telling this story and saying, like, this happened and it was hard and it was also hilarious and I still loved these people and they still deserved dignity and respect and they acted super weird sometimes. And so, like, being able to sort of juggle all of those balls, as it were, in a space where, people are really uncomfortable talking about those topics, and they're even more uncomfortable laughing about them. And so being able to open up those lines of dialogue using humor is so valuable, and also really scary, you know? Were you ever, like, afraid of talking about or touching on one of those more taboo subjects through humor? Like, how do you do that? How do you navigate that,
so
potential discomfort?
so one of the things, so in the class I took with ASAP, I mean, so it's a 6 week class, and they get into actual like humor theory. So it's
Mhm,
not just you're going to come and say stuff until we laugh, and that's it. It's actually talking about a joke is constructed of setup, punch. Here's a tag. You need to create tension. Here are the different laugh triggers. So reasons why people would do that. How do you brainstorm all these sort of different things? And so for me, anything where I think there's tension, I ask
mhm,
myself, how do I release the tension? So when I talk about mental health,
mhm,
right, or for some of the, I don't have a lot of jokes. I have more stories with that. But as I'm
mhm,
trying to release that tension, where do I think people are going to be tense? All right, what kind of joke or sort of thing? And so a lot of times I use analogies and things like that to come along with it. So
mhm,
if we're talking about this real serious thing of a person being deep in loss and depression they can't get out, then I'll talk about, it's kind of like you had you're sleeping in bed and you're having a really good dream and you're struggling to get, but you can't. You're
mhm.
just caught in, so there's that analogy to something that's just a little less scary for people,
Right.
right? And then kind of coming back and forth to that. So
You're like a student of this stuff.
yes. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
been really a sort of an intentional process. I find that really, really fascinating that you have sort of committed yourself to learning the both the art and the science.
Yeah, it's I think so for me, I tend to be a practical person. So like if I'm doing something, it's because it's going to help me do a thing.
Mhm,
Right? So storytelling helps me to do things in my other parts of my life. Other things help me to do things with storytelling, and so there's that intentionality. And then I'm an all or nothing person. Uh, either I am all the way into this, or I'm not really all that interested. The only
mhm,
exception is like things where you get for like a paycheck. I'm like, okay,
mhm.
I don't really want to be here right now, but you said I got these things called bills, and apparently I need the money you have to be able to
Right.
do with that. But yeah, it makes life more fun if you look at all the things you're doing and there are things that you're like, I'm 100% into that. So
Yeah. 100%. No, I love that. What comes up for me right now, I don't know why it just popped into my head. I'm a little, I guess, sort of slow in my brain right now, but the number one fear in, you know, traditionally, after polling for, decades, was public speaking.
mhm.
Um, Second to public speaking was like being on fire. And so, It strikes me that like you have, I don't know if you've actually been on fire, but you've been real close to fire for a really, really long time. Uh, which is scarier to you?
Which is scarier?
Yeah. Or probably neither, and now we're all gonna hate you because you're not afraid of the two biggest fears.
I think what it is there's a respect there, right? So like when it comes to a fire, like a fire's not trying to kill you, it's just going to happen to kill you if you
Right,
don't do the right things.
right.
So if you respect all the things you're supposed to do, you've got a really good chance of being just fine. With public speaking or storytelling, public speaking, any of that, if I'm saying something on stage, that means it's so important to me that no amount of fear I have in me is greater than the importance of saying that thing. Now that doesn't mean like I'm not nervous, whatever else, but then this you just set up a process and normally as long as after I get the first line out,
Mhm.
and then there's a whole level of like I may be like up here with like I'm a bit anxious, and I say the first line and I'm down here, I'm like, okay, we're just talking. That's all we're doing. So I think I don't think there's the as I told my nephew one time, it's not the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of your
Yeah,
fear. So
exactly. Exactly. No, I really love that. I love that idea that it's really interesting to think about, the fear of public speaking in the way that you just described, which is like many people just don't have something that they feel so compelled to say that they will push through that initial anxiety. And that's not like I think so many people sort of build it into like, oh, I'm just not the kind of person who will do that. Or I'm not, I don't do public speaking because it makes me nervous. And it's like, well, maybe, but what if you just have never felt so compelled to say something out loud that you needed to push through that anxiety? And when you in your life, if you, have that moment or that inclination where something feels so important for you to say out loud, then you will push through the anxiety. And so then it stops that sort of, or it interrupts that narrative that
mhm.
that person has about themselves. And I don't know, I want to like ruminate on that for a while. Maybe you just haven't had a reason.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I think the other thing that helped me is so my mom raised me as a single parent. She was in the military, and so we traveled a lot.
Mm.
And so there was always something new and whatever else. And so I just got used to. And my mom's rule, like particularly with food, was like you got to try it once. She's not gonna force you to keep doing it and everything else, but just once, just a little bit, and then whatever. And I think for me, I kind of took that to like to everything, not everything. Like I didn't say, what, just cocaine. I'll just try just a little bit right now. And then
Right,
I
I
didn't.
gotta
There
I
was some
gotta
limit.
make sure, I can't, right. I get it.
Yeah, but so between that and then traveling, I mean, we left from Philly. We went to our very first country, which was Augusta, Georgia, which coming from Philly, that was country in so many different ways. And I was confused about it, but I mean, I got along, and then my mom was like, "We're going to go Belgium," and I was like, "Well, how long
Ah, what just happened?
of a drive is that?" Back up. There we go. You hear me again?
I do. I'm so sorry. Okay, Belgium. How long of a drive is that? So
Yes, that's what
sorry.
I said. How long of a drive is that? And she's like, "No, baby. Let me show you this globe, and we're gonna see that there's other countries out there." But so going to all those places, and so the military, when you go to places, okay, here's your welcome packet. We got to teach you about the language a little bit. They give you a sponsor. So I did that, and then of course, then we went to Germany, same thing. And so it's just I got used to moving and always trying something new and not really knowing for sure. And this is how I'm going to figure out who I am. So I just kept doing it.
I think as I don't know, you're a Gen Xer, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, I mean, nobody in the previous generations either knew how to do this, but there became this sort of gap, this social gap that said, we go from, sort of ignoring the humanity of our children entirely to to creating so much comfort and ease for our children that
Mm.
they, so like it went from being like a war zone to being like living in a palace, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's this huge gap where so many kids, I guess, our children, people our children's ages, aren't learning to be uncomfortable, aren't learning to challenge themselves in those ways where it's still safe, you still have a home, you're loved, you're,
Hmm.
like we shouldn't like just throw our children to the wolves necessarily, but providing them with those opportunities to learn exactly what you said, to learn who they are, to learn how to navigate discomfort, to learn how to understand, like, oh, this is what it feels like, and I will survive this, temporarily awful feeling of fear and anxiety and uncertainty. And, there's something on the other side of it. Um, what a gift you were given. And I have no doubt that your mother wasn't thinking, how can I give these children this gift of, knowing themselves? She was just doing her thing and living her life and, being a person. But regardless, you got this gift.
Yeah, I think for my mom though, and it's something I think about for my kid, but then trying to find that same balance that you talk about.
Mhm.
Um, I think every parent trying to be a good parent, they're trying to figure out how do I give my kids something that I didn't get, or how
Yes.
do I do that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
so for us, I mean, we lived in the hood in Philly, starting out, and we had the whole government cheese, which is not really cheese; it's just a yellow brick with like Cheeto sprinkled over it, and they call it cheese.
No.
Is
Yeah.
really what it is, right?
Right.
The military was a way for us to travel and see stuff. I mean, it had healthcare built into it, so we didn't have to
Right.
worry, right? So that was the step up,
Mhm.
and so particularly when we traveled, I mean, I got to see places that there's no way being in Philly. My prom in high school was in a castle in Heidelberg, Germany, right? That was a common thing for everybody who went to high school over there, right?
Right.
So I didn't realize how common it was until I came back here and I'm talking to people my age, and yeah, we had it at
The
the
Hyatt.
yeah, we had it in the school gym. We dressed it up
Right.
real nice. Where'd you have yours? It was just it's just a little thing we did. It just not that big a
Wasn't
deal.
that big of a deal, right? Just a castle, you know.
Right. I we went to for my senior class trip, we went to Ibiza, Spain before I realized how cool Ibiza, Spain was. It was just like, yeah, that we always plan a trip like this. Like, why wouldn't we? Every school does this,
Right. We
you
went to
know.
Nag's Head for Beach Week. Not the same.
Yeah, it's a little different. A little different.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just but I think my mom knew that the military would provide that. Would provide her a way to show me this is what the rest of the world looked like while we kind of explored and that sort of thing. I think some
Right.
of the other stuff, just like you said, is happenstance. Like I have two daughters. The oldest is 26. The youngest is about to turn 10, which she has reminded me for the last 11 months that she's about to turn 10.
It's a big
Uh,
deal, Dad.
yes, yes, it is. Uh,
Don't you forget it.
I cannot. I cannot. Right. And so so just like her, I think of like how can I provide stuff, but like we don't travel as much.
Mhm.
So I mean, I've done it with the like, okay, we're going to be involved in a bunch of different things, and we're just going to try stuff. So we're constantly, the sport, whatever it is, the community stuff. We're like, hey, we've got a short class on this, or whatever. Fantastic. Let's sign up for it. And we have found that soccer's okay, swimming is awesome, and basketball is horrible. They are mean and they yell at you when you run and it hurts your legs, and we ought not to ever do that. Well, that's fine. We just going to try it. So,
Right. Right. I agree with that assessment of actually pretty much every sport. So uh and trying it is how you know that it's not for you. You know, there does become, oh, I'm hearing myself. Weird. I don't know what just happened.
I don't
Huh.
know. I hear you okay.
Okay, good. Anybody who's listening, if there's an echo, please let me know because I have been working really hard to not have that happen. Um, so Rob, if you're out there, I know you're running the If You Could See Me page right now. So if you're out there and you're hearing an echo, please let me know. Okay. Yeah, it's so interesting because I think a lot of the If You Could See Me project is really focused on like the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we can do,
Mhm.
and in many cases those stories come from places of, you know, uh what we can't do, or the areas where we limit ourselves. And so, it's a really important point that you bring up, that like, well, at least if you're going to say you don't like something or can't do something or don't want to do something, it's, do it from a place of at least having tried that thing,
Mhm.
other than the obvious, which we've already addressed. There are some things you don't need to try to know they're not for you. But, in so many cases, I think people live their entire lives saying, I'm not the person who does that big, brave, bold, I'm just this. And there's nothing wrong with being whatever you are, unless there's something else you really want to try. And the only thing that's keeping you from trying that thing is that message that says, well, I'm just not the person that does that.
Yeah, and an interesting thing that goes along with that, and I was reading about it, and it's like I knew this about storytelling, uh, but reading it in this either article or book that I saw really brought it up. Is the idea of how are you framing your story,
Right.
right? And so, and we see this all the time. I've did some fun posts here recently just about Disney and the fairy tales and things like that. There's the Disney fairy tales, and then there's the real fairy tales, and then there's like some other. Whew, wow, some endings are so much more of a surprise. I'm just telling you, go find the real version
Yes,
of.
don't read Grimm's fairy tales without first preparing yourself that it ain't Disney.
Yeah, read it yourself, and then decide that that's what you want to read to your kids.
Yeah, don't, yeah.
But the framing of it, so whenever there's this like a remake of a movie or a book or something like that, or TV show rather, you just change the frame of a look, like the perspective, like how the people see it and what angle you're looking at it, and you get a whole different story.
Yeah.
And we can, you know it's amazing if you can take someone who's working on a story, and I've seen this, and they say this is the story, and you say, well, that's one version of the story. What if you shift it? And if you help them shift that story, then that helps them to shift kind of like how they see themselves, the world, or whatever else.
Mm-hmm. It's so, well, I mean, that's the work I do as a therapist too. Um, because so much of our own suffering is, you know, imposed through the lens that we see the world. Now, that does not negate, I'm a feminist therapist, so part of that is like recognizing that there's lots of flawed systems and
Mm.
situations, and there's lots of oppression and injustice that is also imposed upon people at varying different levels and in various different places. And there are always situations where we decide we're going to, view the story through a particular lens.
Right.
And when we decide to, I just hit my microphone, when we decide to shift the narrative, to shift the way we choose to sort of watch the movie of our lives or narrate the movie of our lives through a different lens. I mean, I did that in the writing of my first show, which became my book. And that was, like the darkness of not talking about serious mental illness in my
Mhm.
family, and keeping that a secret and trying to sort of live in the world as if this thing wasn't a huge part of who I am and what made me love and value my grandparents, and specifically, um to, well, what if the mental illness and the way that they approached that was part of what was so amazing about them, and how can I fully honor their experience and the contribution that they made to my life without acknowledging that magnificent courage that they had, right? And so then completely shifting it to, instead of this is a thing that I should be ashamed of and try to like gloss over, what if I brought it into the light and I said, hey, this is a big part of who I am and why I am who I am. And it changed everything. And it opened me up and my whole life up to this whole new possibility that, it's okay to celebrate what has caused you pain, or and commemorate and honor the fact that you lived through it and you learned how to navigate it, and you know you are here now. So that's me pontificating. Thank you. Thank
Well
Welcome to
done. Well done.
thank you for attending my TED Talk. Uh, so I think that your perception of, or your explanation of, like, when you change the narrative, when you change the perspective, the narrative can change.
Mhm.
And that's true for storytelling, but it's really true for life.
Yeah. 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 I'm a person who never gets bored. Like there's always something to do. Like I don't understand
Yes.
people like even my daughter now, she's like, I don't have anything to do. Really? Because I can give you things to do. You may not like all of them,
Yes.
but I will find something for you.
I have that conversation all the time. I'm like, only boring people get bored. Come on, let's go.
What I think about in relation to what you said there is the um man, it was on the tip of my tongue, and now it just went away. It's probably lost there, and it'll come up in like an hour or two later after the show's done. Um,
You can email it to me and I'll.
it'll be a PS postscript or whatever else
It's okay.
to go along with it.
We can do that.
Yeah, no, I lost it. I got
Okay.
focused on my baby girl, as I do. Um,
Yes,
yeah,
as
a
we
lot of
do.
the I will say, I do a lot of stories about her.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think so that honestly, it comes from my insecurity of being a dad.
Hmm.
People talk about like, hey, you're doing a good job, but I'm like, but I've never done this job before. Are you sure?
And you never
Right? Like,
know.
unfortunately, raising kids is like a retirement investment fund. Like you don't know how good you did until like after it's all done, and you're like,
Yep.
ooh, I did great, or well, you know what? I guess we'll
Could have
just
done better.
yeah. But that was also something that I learned about storytelling. Some of the best stories, you really have to get to that deeper meaning,
Hmm.
but that also actually holds true for jokes, right? So
Oh yeah. Mm.
you can do a simple joke of like, why did the chicken cross the road, right? And you'll get people to laugh, but the jokes that people really talk about, and when it's like this really personal thing that you've connected or related to in a particular way and things like that. So there's people like Mike Birbiglia. I hope I said the name right.
Birbiglia. I love Mike
Birbiglia,
Birbig. Oh my gosh.
right?
Master.
And then him, I think I want to say Nikki Glacier, maybe. So they're telling these jokes, but they come from a deep personal sort of thing. But people remember them; they
Mhm.
connect those sort of things. And so I think for people telling stories, that's the scary space.
Yeah.
For the people where I've coached with doing stories, or they've been in our storytelling class, because I teach at ASAP now. I hope teach the storytelling part there. And when you really start getting into there and get people kind of comfortable with there, that's where there's just like this breakthrough. This like the whole body shifts. Like, oh, is that what I'm talking about? After you get through that hump, you have to get them through and now we're going to say that out loud to the world.
Right.
But if they get through those two things, what they wind up on the back end with is understanding that they were not as alone as they thought they were.
Always.
Yeah.
It's the greatest gift. It's the greatest gift to receive. It's the greatest gift to give, to walk alongside a person in that process. And then it's also incredible to witness.
Yeah. And then hands down, I think that's one of the things that encouraged me to keep going to tell the stories.
Mhm.
Like, so the first time I told a story in the marathon, it did all right. I mean, it was like in the eighth, whatever, it didn't win. So I was like, that's okay. I mean, Toastmaster stuff works. I just need to tweak it. But the thing that really kept me going was like two people afterwards, like, and I know what you felt. And they identified, they understood. And it was like, oh, so you mean it just isn't just all in my head? Like there's other people with these thoughts or whatever else. And then that's when I thought thinking like maybe we have a responsibility to tell stories. Maybe not
Yes.
it might not be on stage, but just to tell these stories so other people know that they're not alone with whatever's in their head. So
Yep. Ugh. Okay, so how do people respond to that? We have the responsibility. Do you say that to people?
it was something that I've been thinking about here over the last year
Mhm.
about having that responsibility. I've maybe only said it a few times,
Yeah.
and you could just I see like this shift, like they're thinking about it, like wow, some people I think take it better than others. Some people are like, all right, and this is that moment, right? Like again, for me, I have to feel that this is so important in order for me to stand on stage to be able to serve a purpose,
Mhm.
right? And then for other people, it's still kind of a nervous sort of thing, right? So it takes a little bit. Everyone has their different they have their different gauge. It's like going to Vegas. Some people they've got the Ziploc bag of however many nickels that they're going to do, and other people they're like, you know what? I can refinance the house. Yeah, we can make this work.
So it's a different sense of it all feeds into the individual person's nature, and how risk averse are you, and how comfortable are you with taking on that responsibility. I do think that that's a sometimes I say, well, I know in my TED talk I said your story can change the world,
Yes.
and I didn't mean like, you know you tell a story one time and you are charged with changing the whole world once, right?
You get one time.
That's
Don't
it.
mess this up.
Right. But I have been in many group settings where I have said that as part of the instruction process or the inspiration process. And there's one person in the room who feels like that is their call to duty, right? That
Mhm.
is, and not one person, like a lot of people that feel, okay, right, that is what I needed somebody to tell me. And then there's always one person who's like, but like changing the world feels way too scary for me. Like I don't want all that responsibility. And I'm like, but don't you understand that if you tell your story one time to one person and it has an impact on the way that they see themselves or the
Mhm.
world or their relate, then you have changed the world. You have made a significant difference through the process of telling your story. And so that's not, like people impose whatever they impose on the words that you use based on where they are, right? And so your story can change the world has a lot of meaning to it, but it doesn't mean that you're in charge of changing the entire world all at one time.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote, and I'm gonna butcher it, so I won't try not to do it too bad. But it's like, there's a young man who wanted to change the world. He tried; it was too hard. He got older, and then he tried to change like his country, and then as he got older, he realized really just change the world for one person,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I think that's real, and that's really the essence of what you got there. Sometimes,
Mhm.
sometimes what that story is does change the entire world.
Sure.
But if you just change the world for one person, that could be the person who could go on and change the entire world.
Exactly. Exactly. It's that, that butterfly effect, that, the tiniest movement can create huge ripples.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know. And that's why when we say, well, I can't, or my story is not important, or I'm not the person who does that, um, we 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 limit ourselves. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine, like, don't tell your story if you don't want to. I'm not like, you're bad and you're not taking on your responsibility. It's not a judgment. But I do know that, there are so many people who stop themselves from doing it, because not because they don't want to, but because they don't think they're allowed to. And I think that what you're saying is, and what I love so much about your story in general, is that you can do anything, right? Like, there doesn't have to be this giant, you didn't walk in with sort of like, I'm going to be the greatest storyteller in all the land, and I'm going to be a performer. And you took it at this like really beautiful incremental, like, I just want to learn this. I want to get better at what I'm already doing. And I want to, develop myself as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I am the exact opposite. Admittedly, like, I am, I've been a performer since I was born, and I was singing show tunes before I was talking. And so the weight of, like, the spotlight has always been sort of very, very bright in my eyes. That was a terrible mixed metaphor. And so, the idea that, like, you can walk in or walk onto the stage without the weight of, you know, changing the whole world with your story, like, that's something that I had to learn for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I say that to other people because that was a message that I had to learn for myself. Like, can we remove all the weight of all of this stuff? Can we remove and just show up and do the thing? Just show up and try. Just, if you're terrible, you can get better. If you don't like it, you don't have to do it anymore. Like, but if you show up and you just take a bite of the green beans, you eat the peas, you go to Ibiza for your senior trip. That does not fit. It's a whole another thing. But, just show up and do the thing and try and see, and give yourself the gift of knowing that, you did it, and that, whether you ever do it again, you tried.
Yeah. Yep. I like the idea of just knowing where I stand with things, knowing that I tried. Like, I was on the All Air Force wrestling team, and I tried to make it to the Olympics. A spoiler alert, did not. You can't find my face on any Wheaties box. There's not me biting gold medal, bronze, silver, not even a nickel. I'm not biting any kind of medal, but I'm fine with it.
Not biting any kind of metal. Sorry. That took me a second.
But I'm fine with it because so I gave it my all out best. It just didn't match. I mean, the people who beat me out, I mean, they were well worth. I mean, they did the stuff, and I mean, I had a great experience. I bonded with a whole bunch of people. I had an experience of training at the Olympic Training Center. Like, how many people get the chance to do that? Um, just it also taught me things about being mentally and physically tough at the same time, which was like a huge help when I was going through firefighter training. And of course, you've got to do the same sort of thing. So, yeah, just that idea of knowing that I tried it, that's where I stand. That's good enough for me. I'd be more apprehensive later in life, thinking,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if I'd done this a little different or more or tried it, and what would have happened. It's just, no, I know exactly where I stand because I tried it and I did great, not so great, whatever.
So, it sounds like I mean, you have a very strong work ethic, and you're not, you're showing up with all of yourself, but it also sounds like you're not afraid of failure.
Yeah, because if you fail enough times, you realize it's going to happen eventually. Like,
Right.
At least for me, that's how I kind of think about it. Very few people are good at something the very first time.
Mhm.
There's normally like, oh, you tried it, it was okay, or oh, you got to get better. So it takes a stick witness, if you will, of doing
Mhm.
it over and over again before you really figure that out. And so that's why, like for me, either I set goals. So like for the storytelling stuff, actually it's been this way every year, but my first year was every month I'm going to tell a story on stage somewhere, because this is how I'm going to figure out if I'm going to be any good at this. And so that's what I press to do.
Yeah.
But and I actually have done that the entire time, so about 6 years now. So there's normally a story I have told. Most of them not repeats. But what it's also forced
Wow.
me to do is look at a story, uh, hit my story idea, develop the story, put it into a framework, test it out, deliver it, make adjustments. All right, I've done it for that one. Do it all over again. And from that repetition is how I started. Oh, this is how you build this and move this around and things like that. So, like, yeah, for me, there's definitely I think about the fact that I'm human,
Right.
regardless of like what your spiritual, religious belief or whatever. You got to know that we make mistakes. Things aren't easy, and so they just. I might fail this first time. That's okay. I'm probably with millions of other people who have failed at this thing at the beginning, and we'll see what happens if I stick with it. So,
Mm. So I am sort of called, I guess, to ask you how this incredibly healthy attitude that I'm so impressed by, and I kind of just want to follow you around and make you my guru. Um, how this has helped you navigate what is no doubt uh difficult as a first responder, as a firefighter, as an active duty military, member. There has no doubt been, probably more than once, some pretty significant traumas, either for you directly or for the people that interact with on a regular basis. How do you one, how do you manage that yourself? And how do you now as a leader sort of help the men and women and individuals in your orbit, navigate those difficult emotions?
uh, having a grouping of people who get it. I stumbled upon that in the military. Military is a little different. I come from a military family, so my mom
Mhm.
was in the military. My uncle, my cousin joined. I had two cousins that joined. Right. So when I had that, I didn't understand something or felt in a bad place, I had other people who understood the experience with me, and then so we could kind of talk about that in terms in that sort of way. The fire service, I have been more purposeful in setting it up for myself and then talking to other people about how they need to set that up for them as well. Of how you just, even if it's just someone you just check in with every now and again. There are some people I call just I haven't heard from you in a week or whatever, and just how are you doing? Just those back and forth kind of conversations. There are some jokes like we can say in the fire service, and other people be mortified, but like that was the. But for us, it's like, yeah, it's safe here. Like I get it. You needed that release, whatever, and we can have
Right.
those kind of conversations. Um, Having that safe space and those regular grouping of people that you talk to, and however you do it, whether it's in um, it's just in the different groupings of life, so they understand different parts. There's one grouping of people that I talk to if I want to talk about religion or spirituality or whatever, right? Because that's not everybody who's in the fire service.
Mhm.
But when I want to talk about how the grind of the shift is just wearing people down, I got
Mhm.
to talk to people in the fire service. I know, particularly once I first started, and I was going to church, and people were like, "Well, hey, why aren't you in church on Sunday?" I I've been at the fire station for 24 hours. I would,
Right.
but then they're like, no, or even if you got off that morning, it's like, you didn't come to church. I mean, yeah, because I just got finished working for 24 hours.
Right.
So that's what I mean about like, you have to find a grouping of people. And I say grouping, it could be one or two people. I like the idea of a group. So, in case someone just isn't available or whatever else, you've got a few different people and perspectives.
Mhm.
So for me, that's how it is. I have some people that I trust. I touch base with every now and again, and whenever I'm at a point to where I'm like, I don't know if I'm really good at this or not, or I'm bad or whatever, I talk to them because they're also honest with me. Because sometimes you're like, yeah, you sucked at that. You ought not do that no more. But sometimes it's like, no, you're doing okay.
Right.
Just keep pushing.
Oh, it's so it's interesting because I've had this conversation with a couple of people recently about the value of having that network, that both the accountability people, the people who are going to be honest with you, but also the people who understand, the people that you can sit with
Mhm.
and say, I am struggling, or hey, how are you? Like, I
Mhm.
noticed that you haven't been around, or you haven't been as connected. Are you isolating yourself right now? Are you feeling the weight of the thing? um Having worked in community mental health for a really long time, I get that sort of gallows humor thing where, people say things or make jokes about things that, to relieve tension, that in other settings would be completely inappropriate. But, the need to sort of express the magnitude of darkness that often we see and experience within the human condition. I think that you have to have places where you can release that, where people they get it, like you said. um but the thing that really comes up for me in all of that is that sort of like the connectivity, the commitment of everyone, maybe not at the same levels all the time, but that people show up for each other,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is
Yes.
a space where we are all in this together, and we agree to check in with one another. We agree to
Mhm.
notice when something isn't working or something is off, so that people don't fall into the abyss of darkness and despair. And, because once trauma takes hold, once the depression of trauma takes hold, it is very natural to isolate yourself. It is very
Yeah.
natural to, cut yourself off from the world and begin to tell yourself that there's no possible way that anyone could understand you.
Yeah. And sometimes you don't realize that's where you're at.
That's
It
right.
takes someone from that network to be like,
Yes.
look, I don't know if you noticed about you. It's,
Right.
it's kind of like that Snickers commercial. Like, you're not acting like yourself. Are you hungry?
Right. Right. Exactly. Are you being crushed by the weight of the world and your professional choices? you know, have a Snickers or have a friend, like, here is, can I please pull you from the depths of despair? Because you're hangry right now, right?
Hmm.
So no, I think that it is so important, and it speaks to, again, going back to sort of that responsibility that we have for one another. If you have a responsibility to tell your story, it's because we humans have responsibility for one another,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I like
right? Yeah. And so it's the same as if I'm telling a story to a group of professionals who share my experience, or if I'm standing on a stage telling thousands of people.
that.
It's just about human connection.
Which is a big part of storytelling.
That's kind of the the majority of it, right? Like, that's the whole thing. Um, Nick, tell the audience where they can find you, because everyone I know that hears this, it's here on Facebook. It's also gonna go up on our podcast feed at the Mental Health News Radio Network, and lots more people will be able to hear it there. Tell people where they can find you.
Sure. So storytelling on purpose is the blog. So that's stop 365.blog. And so there's everything from shows to just the things I'm trying with it. And I even talk about like the shows that I'm in. So you can go to my About Me page, and I'm keeping up with it there. I'm kind of slowed down here for the next few months, but I'll probably try to pick back up in October. I'm actually on Clubhouse. And so I'm doing a storytelling show Sunday night. Jeff Stein, he's like Sunday Stories or something like that. So I'm doing a
Cool.
story there. I'm doing some comedy in person in Manassas, Virginia. It's a clean comedy show run by Angela Moore. So I think it's going to be in person and also live stream. So there's that there as well. And I think and in September I'll be actually in Orlando, Florida. Depending on whatever natural catastrophe has happened between COVID, weather, whatever. I'm just
Florida is always a crapshoot, really.
I think I'm going to be there. Come gamble with me, if but yeah, I'm there. We're doing a show there with some other military comics about just for military people in the military games. So that's exciting. So those are all the places that you can find me right now. You can find the videos that we did for the Clean AF comedy. Please don't decide that you wanted to find AF comedy for us because we're clean. Clean means no fussing, no cussing. I'm just putting that out there to people. They're clean as no. No, don't finish that sentence. That's not the kind of thing we are.
It says
Go,
AF for a reason.
yes, go watch the videos first, then promote. So
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to grace us with your presence today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for, not only the work that you do, because you're an incredible storyteller, but for being such um, a partner and a supporter of other storytellers as well. Like, you're always the first person to push out something from If You Could See Me. You put us on your blog, you tell people about us, and I very much appreciate that. So thank you. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you to everybody for joining us today, and we will see you again next week. Bye.
bye.